All right, a very good morning to everybody who's joining us today. Welcome to the first Building Blocks 2022 June conference pre-event workshop. And as people continue to come in, I'll just give a short and brief introduction about today's workshop. So today's workshop is Python 0 to Hero, conducted by Rayan, Raphael, and Celine. They are students from ACJC, and they'll be giving you a short introduction on Python. Yeah. So without further ado, I will pass the time over to them and let them take the lead.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can Okay. Before we start, can I make sure that you guys have created your Code Collab account? So if you haven't, I'll show you guys what's the process when you guys create your account. So head over to this website. Okay, it's on the screen right now. Okay, I'll give you guys a second to copy the link. Okay, once you guys have copied the link and went into Code Collab, you should be greeted with this page. Okay, and what I want you guys to do is click the plus sign here, search for Python 3, name it whatever you want, let's say BBCS Python, and then create a project. Okay, so you go into this file and you should see this page here. Okay, this is for those who haven't created your file yet and shared it to us. So click on the share at the left side, and then over here, share through email. There should be the emails of our email sent in the chat. You can just paste any of the email into this box inside, and then you send it to us. Okay, this is to allow us to look at your progress throughout the workshop. And if you guys need any help, we will be there to assist you. Okay? So I'll give you guys about a minute to do it, because I know some of you guys have not done it yet. Okay, those who are not sure where to find the emails, is in the chat, in the Zoom chat. So Celine should have sent it in the Zoom chat. Okay, I'll give you guys another 10 seconds to do so, and then we'll start on with the workshop. Okay, I hope you guys have done it already. Okay, those who haven't, you guys can ask how to do it in the chat, and then Celine and Raphael will assist you. But without further ado, let's start on with the workshop. Okay. So before we start, here's a little more about us. We're from ACJC, currently studying in year 2, and we take we take computing as an A-level subject. We are extremely passionate about coding, and since we use Python during our day-to-day basis, we thought it would be nice to conduct a workshop to teach you guys, to teach those who are beginning in their coding journey some basics about Python, so that you guys can embark this coding journey and start as soon as possible without facing any difficulties. So, yeah, alongside with me, we have Celine and Raphael, and I'm Rayan. So this is a brief timeline on what's going to be happening during today's workshop. So first, I'll be introducing what is Python, and then the basic syntax of Python and the different data types that there is in Python, which you guys will be very familiar with at the end of this workshop. And next up, we have Celine that will be talking about data structures, and Raphael will introduce conditionals and loops, and then Celine will end off by talking about functions. Right? So I hope you guys are excited for today's workshop, and we'll begin. So you guys might be wondering, why would you want to choose Python over so many other languages? Well, right now, currently, Python is one of the most popular languages in the world, and part of it is because it has such easy and beginner-friendly syntax. And why do I say that? If you guys experience through the workshop, you'll realize that Python is really similar to English, the English language, and it's very straightforward. and you guys will be able to understand it very easily. Okay, and also Python is used in a lot of areas in today's society, such as web development, game development, desktop applications. So learning Python will help you guys, kickstart your journey and allow you to venture through all these areas in the future, right? So if you guys are interested in any of these jobs, learning Python will be really beneficial for all of you, right? So let's start with learning Python and the basic syntax to get you started. Okay, so right now I'll be going through some of the basic syntax and data types that you can find in Python. But before we do that, I'll introduce a scenario for you guys so that you guys will feel more excited throughout the whole workshop, and you guys will be able to sort of know what you can do with your Python knowledge in the future. Okay, so let's imagine this. You are a world-class thief called Robin King, and you want to rob this bank, right? And to leave behind the least amount of evidence, you only have a laptop with Python inside of it, So, but throughout this, heist, you have many challenges that you'll be facing, and you can only use Python to help you solve these challenges because you're not really good at math, right? Or so with that said, you're faced with the first task. Outside the guard post, you see that there's a gate key inside of it. And the only way you can, unlock this guard post lock is to answer this math expression that you are given when you try to unlock the lock. But the thing is, you only have 15 seconds to unlock it. And you know that you're bad at math. So the only way is to use Python to help you generate the answer and help you crack the password. Right. Now that you guys are clear of the scenario, we'll help you guys learn about how you can do so. Right. So in Python, there are 4 main basic data types: integers, strings, booleans, and float. Right. So integers are basically whole numbers. And to the left, you can see 10, 32, and 42 are examples of integers. Strings are a collection of characters, and what's fascinating about Python strings are that you can also store a single character in the string. And usually, how to tell that it is a string is when there is a single quotation or a double quotation, which you can see on the left. Booleans are either true or false. These are very simple, and you guys should be able to understand that. Now comes float. Float are basically numbers with a decimal point, right? So if it's not an integer, if it's not a whole number, it's probably classified as a float, right? So you'll be coming across all these data types as we go along in the workshop. Okay, those who have any questions so far, feel free to ask it in the chat, and Celine and Raphael will assist you guys. Okay, right. So next up, we have variables. In many programming languages, we have variables, and it is used for us to store the data that we give the program, right? So in our variables, we can name it virtually anything, but keep in mind, we try not to name our variables a function name, and we'll see that later. So try not to name it as a function name because it may cause some errors in the future. So X, language, Y are examples of variable names that you can use, right? And what's cool about variables is that it can also define data structures, and Celine will be covering that later, right? So I'll show you guys some examples of how you guys can define variables. So okay, so I'll head on to code collab now. And then, so let's say you can name your variable anything. So hold on. Okay, you can name your variable anything. You can name it number 1 and then equals to something, number, let's say 19. So when we define a variable, make sure you only use a single equal sign, okay? So you want to define, let's say, my name, and you put a equals, and my name is a string, right? It's a collection of characters. So I put quotation and then Rayan, right? And then to run your file, you compile it and you press run. Okay, so now inside of number, if you look at our right, instead of number 1, we have 19. And inside of name, we have Rayan stored inside, right? So this is a short example of how you can store variables in Python. Okay, let's move on. So these are some basic operators that we will be using in Python for your math expressions, and make sure you guys remember these clearly later. So we'll go through them one by one, right? Add, subtract. The first 4, add, subtract, multiply, and divide, I'm sure you guys are familiar with. Okay, instead of an X sign for multiply, we have an asterisk instead. Now you'll be confused what is a floor divide, modulo, and exponential. So we go on to code collab and I'll show you, how this works. Let's say, okay, I'll be using this print function, which helps me output the answer towards the right later, and I'll be going through what it does later, okay? But first, let's look at some examples. We want to divide 10 by 3, right? And then when we print this out, it gives us this very long long float, 3.3333, and sometimes this is not what we want. Sometimes we just want to find the integer that it gives, the whole number that it gives. So what we can do is we can add another backslash, right? And then this will show us 3, which is the integer that we get from 10 divided by 3. What if we want to find the remainder? Now we'll use the modulo sign, which is represented by the percentage sign. Okay, so you replace it with percentage sign, you run it, and it should return a 1. Okay, so I'm sure you guys, there's a file called, there's a link in Code Collab that's being shared in the chat just now. So if you click on the Code Collab link, you should be greeted with BBCS self-learning templates. Inside these templates, okay, we have different files for you guys to try out different examples as we go along the workshop. Okay, so you guys can take about 1 minute, try to load this file up. Okay, those who haven't loaded up yet, you can take 1 minute to load this up, and you should see these folders towards the left. So right now we're going through basic syntax. Click on it and you should see all these different Python files, right? So now we're going through basic operators. You can just load it up and you can try with different numbers as we go along. Okay, so this will help you guys understand how to use all the operators as you go on, right? So take note of this. As we go along, you can try the different Python files. We created them just for you guys to better understand it and try things out on your own if you guys are not sure where to start. Okay, right. So now we look at exponential. So what is exponential? Exponential is basically just the power of something. So let's say we want to find what is the 2 to the power of 2, okay, which is 4, right? What we can do is we use the exponential sign. Okay, let's use the right side. Print 2 double asterisk 2, and this shows what is 2 to the power of 2. So the double asterisk is the power sign, okay, in Python, right? And it should print a 4 out, right? Okay, let's move on. So you guys can try out the different operators in the Python file and throughout the whole workshop. Okay. Any questions? Just ask in the chat, and Celine and Raphael will assist you. Okay. Right now we look at some logical operators. We'll first go through not. Okay, because I feel like it is a bit easier for you guys to understand what it does. So let's say we have x defined as true, right? It's a Boolean defined true. X equals to true. When we not x, it will return a false. So let's say you have x equals to false. When you not x, you return a true. Very simple. It's just the opposite, of let's say it's true, you'll change to a false. If it's a false, you change to a true. Okay, very simple. You can try that out in your own idle. And then we come to and or. Right. So and will only return a true if both expressions are a true. So let's say you have true and true, then you'll return a true. If you have true and false, you'll return a false. Okay. So inside the templates, you should be able to see the and operator .py. You can try it out by changing the values. So you can change it to true and false and whatever you want to see what it does. Now let's move on to the or operator. Okay, you only return you return a true if one of them is a true. Okay, so if you have true and true or true, you'll also return a true. Okay, so I know it sounds a bit all over the place because of the truth and truths, false, but you can try things out in the template files. Okay, make sure to compile them before you run, and yeah, you can see what it does with different examples, different variables in the template files. Okay, so you can change the blanks and then see what it does, right? Okay, I'll give you guys some time to digest this, a few seconds, and then we'll move on to comparison operators. Okay. Okay, right. Let's move on. So now we have comparison operators. You guys can take a look at all these comparison operators, and you might find the middle two the bit more challenging, difficult to understand ones, right? The first two, less than, greater than, I'm sure you guys are familiar with. Less than or equal to, also fairly familiar with. So I'll not go through in detail, but you guys might be confused with what does the two in the center do. So in Python, remember how when we create variables over here, we use a single equal sign, right? So instead, when you want to compare if two objects, two items are the same, you use the double equal sign. Okay, so if you want to compare if they are not equal to each other, you just replace the first equal sign with an exclamation mark. We try this out in our code collab. So let's see if you guys can go to the templates folder and try it out as well. Okay, I forgot to mention you guys have to fork the project. So when you guys go into the templates folder, you guys can press this fork project and then name it whatever you want and then fork project. So you should be able to edit it after that. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. Right. So we try it with maybe we ask if one is equals to one. Okay. We think about this and obviously it should return true, right? Because one is equals to one. So we can try things out with different numbers. Let's say we replace this with 2. Okay, we ask if 2 is equals to 1. And it should return a false, right? So double equals is comparing if two items are equal to one another. And it will return either true or false. Okay. So we try it with the exclamation mark now. Is 2 not equals to 1? And if you run it, it should return a true because 2 is not equals to 1, right? So you guys can try out with the templates folder. I'm sure there's an exercise on it. You guys can try it out for comparison operators. Okay, right, let's move on. So we have Boolean expressions. A very simple way to understand what is a Boolean expression is asking the computer a question and the computer only replies with a true or false. Okay, So all along, before what we were doing here, comparison operators and logical operators, sorry, yeah, is asking if it is basically asking a question, right? These are Boolean expressions. Okay, so you can see here these are some examples of Boolean expressions. Is 1 greater than 2, or is high, the string high equals to high. Okay, it should. So this is basically asking the computer a question and it outputs either a true or false. Okay, very simple. And you'll be using these a lot later during your conditionals section. Okay, so we'll take a look at this short little code snippet, and can you guys, try and guess what this piece of code does? Okay, you guys can type it in the chat if you guys guess. If you guys have your guesses, you can type it in the chat, and we'll look at them. So try and figure out what this piece of code does. Hello world, I see hello world. Okay, try hello the name. Okay, that Roy, yep. Okay, good. I see that, 2 of you guys have guessed it correctly. Okay, so we'll move on. So those who guessed, you input your name and then it prints hello and the name you inputted, you are correct. Okay, so we'll take a dive into the first line of code. Right, name equals to input. What is your name? So the function we are going to learn here now is the input function. Okay, so what this does is it takes in whatever input you have into the program, and then right now we are storing whatever you inputted into the variable called name. Okay, you guys can see here. And you guys might be wondering, what is that string in the center of the brackets? Well, this acts like a prompt. So whenever you run into the input statement, it will print that out, and it is basically like the computer talking to you. So we can try it out. Okay, we try the same code. Name equals to input. What is your name? Okay, and then we press run, and you can see here the program asks what is your name, right? So this acts like a prompt. So you can enter, okay, my name is Ryan, and then done, right? You can change this to whatever you want. What is your name and height, for example, and then you can run it and it will change the prompt. Okay, so you can try it out with different prompts inside of it, and make sure that you put it in between the 2 brackets. Okay, when you want to type in the prompt. Okay, right. So an interesting thing about this input function is that whenever you input something, it stores as a string, right? So remember what we talked about just now, string is a collection of characters. So it stores as a string, right? But this is not what we want sometimes. And this will not be helpful for you guys later on during the task, right? Because you need to input so many different numbers. And this might not be what you necessarily want in your program. So one way that we can act around this is we use this function called int, right? I'll show it to you guys now. So basically, it turns whatever string that has a number inside into an integer. Okay, so when you put int bracket surrounding the input, you will turn whatever number you input into an actual number instead of a string. Okay, we'll try it out now, right? So look at this. So let's say we have number equals the input. You guys can code this out along with me. And so enter a number. Okay. And let's say we want to add this number with 10. Okay, we try this. So we add this number, and anything we input, and plus 10. Okay, we'll try this out. So we run it, enter a number. Let's say we want to add 20 with 10. And look, it gives us an error. So why is it, why does it give an error, right? Because now we're adding a string, this number string, into with an actual number, right? So we're adding a string with a number. And in Python, they do not allow that. So that's why it gives you an error. So to fix this, we just wrap this with int. Okay, make sure that you have equal number of brackets on the right and on the left. Okay, make sure your input is in between the int as well. Okay, many people usually forget this bracket, or they simply just miss, they just don't put it inside they don't wrap it around the input. So remember the format, make sure you wrap int around the input. Okay, now we tried it out. So enter a number 20, and now it works, right? 30 is printed out, right? So you added the number 20 with 10, and then you'll get 30. A bonus thing is, what if we do not put it in here, and instead we put a str. Okay, I'll go through what str does later. So we try this out, and then we'll see what it prints. Okay, enter number 20, and look, it prints out 2010. So 20 and 10. But why is that so? So in Python, this is called string concatenation. Basically, you're adding two strings together and forming as one. So you might be able to guess this str converts whatever is inside into a string. Okay, we can try it out with another. We can try it out with, let's say, hello, and then now it's hello 10. Okay, this is called string concatenation in Python. Right? So you guys can try this out. So this is just a bonus for you guys, but you guys won't be using it later. So yeah, let's move on. So this is what you'll be seeing in the output statement. So here we added the name with this string called hello. Right? So you guys saw me using this print function the whole time, right? So print is basically how you output in the Python program. Okay, so when you print whatever that's inside, you print it out. Okay, very simple. So here are the examples of what print does, what print can do. So you have a variable, you print the variable, and you print out whatever's inside. You can also print mathematical expressions. So 3 plus 2 is an example. Here are some other useful functions, and you guys can try it out in the additional functions template folder that we have provided you guys. Okay, and we also guide you guys through the template folder. So those who are not sure where to start, you guys can follow the template. Right. Right. So now you guys have all this knowledge, and we are ready to solve this task. Okay, so try and make use of whatever knowledge that we learned earlier on and try to crack the password. So remember, we have to solve this math equation, right? So I want to challenge you guys to use what we learned just now. So variables, inputs, int, in your program, and to solve this question, right? So here are the numbers that you are given. So if you can see below here are the numbers, right? And then what I want you guys to do is try and recall what is the multiply sign, subtract sign, addition sign, and the power sign, okay? And print the answer out. So I'll give you guys about 5 minutes, and you can try this task out in your own code collab, okay? So the 5 minutes will start now, okay? Okay, yeah, so try it out, and then you guys have any questions, you just ask in the chat, we'll help you guys, okay? Okay, so time is up, and I will move on to the intended solution. So keep in mind, there is no fixed solution when it comes to coding. Okay, if as long as you get the answer, it should be fine. Okay, so we'll move on to what we think is the best, because we want to incorporate everything we learned. Okay, so here's the solution. Can so we want to try and put in the variables that we learned earlier on. So what I put is num1, num2, num3, num4 as individual variables, and we just input all these numbers into these variables, and then we just simply do a print with all the math expressions in the brackets given. I mean, so inside the brackets, okay? And then it should give you the answer 226 something. Okay, so those who yeah, I see a lot of people who solved it. 226790 is the correct answer. So those who got the answer, congrats, good job. Okay, so yeah, this is the intended solution that we hope you guys have. If you don't, it's okay. As long as you get the answer, it should be fine. Okay. At the end of this workshop, we will send you guys a folder that has all the intended solutions. So those who want to copy again or try it out again, you guys can use the templates that we give you guys to solve it again. Yeah. So it's okay if you haven't copied the intended solution now. We'll provide it to you guys at the end of the session. Okay. Right. So now we'll have Celine give us a talk on what are lists and tuples in Python. Right. Without further ado, Celine, please.
Moving on, I'll now teach you all about Python, about list and tuples. Before that, let's get back to our story. Now that the easy part is out of the way, time to face the real challenge, begin the same. You see a numbers and a list of letters written on a piece of paper lying beside the rock. Is it better? Now that the easy part is out of the way, time to face the real challenge, breaking the safe. You see a numbers and a list of letters written on a piece of paper lying beside the rock. Your friend tipped you off yesterday that a password can be found by 1. Using the list of numbers as indexes to find the corresponding letters in the list of letters. 2. Combining the letters to form a word and then reversing the word. So now, what is a list? List is a built-in data structure in Python, and how it works is very similar to a variable, but while a variable can only store a single item at once, a list can be used to store multiple items at one go. The syntax for list in Python is fairly simple. You can just use the square bracket operator and type out the elements you want to place inside the list inside the square bracket operator. Take note, you have to use commas to separate each element. For example, on the screen here, we have the languages list with 3 elements of the data type string: Python, C++, and JavaScript. Next, we have the fruits list with 1 element of the data type in string apple. And finally, we have the list my list with 3 elements of the data type integer 100, 2, and 3. So again, to recap, how you create a list in is with the square bracket operator, and you just place whatever elements you want to store inside the list inside the square bracket operator, and you separate each and every element with the use of commas. Okay. One characteristic of lists that's very useful is that they can store elements of different data types. So Boolean, string, integer, and so on. This means that a list can also store another list as its element. This is called nesting a list. For example, here we have a list of the data type Boolean true, the string zoo, and the integer 17 nested inside a larger list called mylist. So yeah, this is called nesting a list. Now that we know what a list does, we need a way to actually access and use the element inside the list. And this is where list indexing comes in. How list indexing works is basically we are trying to identify, it's like a way to identify each and every element inside the list. And how it works is very similar to how, like, in our classroom, every student have their own index number, right? So in a list, every element is also assigned their own indexes. The only difference is that in Python, all data structures are zero index. This means that instead of counting from 1, we count from 0. For example, here, the element blue will have the index 0, the element red will have the index 1, the element yellow will have the index 2, and so I try to run this code in code collab. Yeah, y'all can see that red is printed out because it's the index with the, it is the element with the index 1 in this list. But if I modify this and I run the code again, yellow will now be printed out because it is the element with the index 2 in this list. So yeah, again, we count from 0. So it's 0, 1, 2. We can also use the square bracket operator to modify the element inside the list. So for example, here, colors 1 equals green, print colors. Yeah, now that when I run the code again, you can see that the new list now has the index, now that has the element at the index 1 as green instead of red, because here we use the square bracket operator to modify the element to green. Also, in Python, there's this thing called negative indexing. How it works is like identical to normal indexing, but now you count from the back. So let me just show you guys first. Yeah, so ping will be printed out because you count from the back. So -1, -2, -3, and -4. So yeah, if I print -4, yeah, blue will be printed out because it's again -1, -2, -3, and -4. So yeah, again, to recap, you can use the square bracket operator to access and modify elements in a list. And negative indexing works fairly similar to normal indexing, but now you start from the back and you start from the number -1. Okay, now we will go on to slicing a list, list slicing. How list slicing works is, it works very similar to list indexing. You also use the square bracket operator. And what it does is that it allows you to access more than one element of the list at one time. So like a chunk or a section of the element of the list at one time. And the syntax is, again, the square bracket operator, but now with the use of a semicolon in the middle to separate the start point and the end point. Yeah, let me just move this over to Code Collab to show you guys what it does. Yeah, so if I run this code, you can see that this print statement gives us an O, G, and R, because O, G, and R is the element with the index 2, 3, and 4 in this list. So take note, the endpoint here, 5, is not printed out. Like we don't see the element at the index 5 printed out in our list. So if I modify this to, you can now see that the element at the index 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is printed out. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, 7 is not printed out. So take note, the endpoint here will not be printed out. So a cool trick that y'all can take note of to print element from a certain index all the way to the end is just this statement over here. So you just leave the endpoint blank. So yeah, you can see that here the list is printed out from the element 5 for the element with the index 5 all the way to the end. Okay, moving on. Oh, do you guys know indexing and slicing are also applicable for strings. So it works on both list and string. So you guys can use the same square bracket operator and semicolon on a string, and it will work the same way. Next, we will learn the functions associated with a string. And the first function we will learn today is the len function. But before I go on to explain further what a len function does, can you guys take some time to look at this code snippet over here and just type in the chat what you think this function do? Yeah. Yeah, correct. The output is 5. So if I copy this over to code collab and I run the program, we can see that 5 is outputted. This is because the len function, what it does is basically it returns to us the length of the list. And in Python, the length of a list refers to the number of elements inside the list. So here, this list over here is do. We have 5 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is why we have 5 printed out to us. This function here is not limited to just list. We can also apply this to a string. So here, if I have a random string, like blah, 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 and I print the length of the string, we can see that now 9 is printed out to us because in the context of a string, len will return the number of characters inside the string. So here we have 9 characters. Okay. If you guys have any questions, feel free to type in the chat. Next is the .append and the .pop method. Basically, what the .append method will add element to the end of the list, and the .pop method allow us to remove an element from the list. Again, I'll go through an example with you guys so we can better understand how this works. I'll go through this example line by line. So for the first line here, we are basically creating an empty list called subjects. And the next line, we are using the .append method to add the element physics inside our string over here. And again, we repeat the same thing. We are adding the element literature to the end of our list here with the .append method. So if I print subjects, yeah, we can see that now our list has 2 elements inside, physics and literature. So if I switch the order around and print literature first, yeah, and append literature first, we can see that now literature comes first in the list. This is because a characteristic of append is that it adds the element to the end of the list. Yeah. Now we will take a look at what dot pop does. Now we'll take a look at what dot pop does. Yeah, so if I run this program, you can see that physics is printed out because physics is the element with the index 1 in this list. But if I remove this over here and didn't specify any index and we print it again physics will be printed out because if we didn't specify any number inside this, Python will assume that you are trying to remove the last element. So for example, to show you better, I'll add. Yeah, so now biology is printed out because again, if we didn't specify any index inside the dot pop method, Python will assume that you're trying to remove the last element. Yep. So again, to recap, we can use the dot append method to add element to the end of the list and the dot pop method to remove element from a list. Next is the dot sort and the dot prefers method. Very straightforward. The dot sort method allows us to sort the list in ascending order. So for example, here on the screen, we have a list that is not sorted in any particular order. And if we do a dot sort method on the list and we print the list, we can now see that the list will now be printed out in ascending order. So 13, 17, 28, and so on. So now the question is, how do you sort a list in descending order? To sort a list in descending order, you can just do a dot refers on the sorted list. Okay. Let me brought this over to Code Collab again. Now I want y'all to try to like scroll. Yeah. Which code do you guys think the first one or the second one will give us a list that's sorted in descending order correctly? Just type in the chat, the first one or the second one. Okay, Ryan Lee say 1, Jaden 2. Okay. So the correct answer is 1. This is because if I do a dot refers on the list first, for example here, and we run the code. So when we do a dot refers on the list, we are just basically like reversing the order of elements in this list. And then we do a dot sort, which sorts the list in ascending order. So we are just sorting a list that's already sorted, a list that's in random order in ascending order. And this is why like the second one is wrong. The correct way to do it is to sort the list first and then reverse the list. So yeah, here we see that the list is now sorted in descending order. So again, to recap, you should sort a list first and then reverse, and not the other way around. Again, to sort a list in descending order, you should do a dot sort first, followed by a dot reverse. Now, moving on, we will learn to the second data structure of today's tuples. Tuples also a built-in data structure in Python. And how it works is it's very similar and identical to a list, but with limited functionality. Here, this table here summarizes the two main differences of lists and tuples that y'all should take note of. Firstly, lists are denoted by square brackets, while tuples are denoted by the round bracket operator. And next, a list is mutable, while a tuple is immutable, so it's not mutable. What do I mean by this? I'll use the next example to demonstrate. So if I run the first part of the code, as expected, the string is printed out because it is the element with the index 1 in this tuple. But if I try to run the second part of the code, you can see that an error statement is thrown at us. And if we read the error, tuple object does not support item assignment. What this means is that we are not allowed, Python does not allow us to modify a tuple. So this is what I mean when I say a tuple is not mutable. We cannot modify or change any element inside the tuple once it is declared at the start. So once it's created in the start with its elements, it should remain like this way throughout the entire run of the program. So the method earlier that we used on a string, on a list like .append and .pop will not work on a tuple because you cannot modify elements inside the tuple. So what method can we use with a tuple? This .count and .index method can be applied on a tuple, and very simple, the .count method returns the number of times a certain element appears inside the tuple. And the .index method returns the index of the first occurrence of a certain element inside the tuple. So, for example, take note, we use the round bracket operator instead of the square bracket operator to declare or to create a tuple in Python. So if I run this code here, we will get a 0. This is because there's no element 5 inside this tuple over here. Thus, when we try to count the number of 5 inside this element, it will throw us a 0. But when I try to modify this to 4 and I run the code again, now we have a 3 because there's 1, 2, 3 element. There's 1, 2, 3 number. There's 1, 2, 3 numbers of 4 inside this tuple. Yeah. And over here, we can see that the second part of the code gives us a 2 because 4 is because 1, 0, 1, 2 is the index of the first occurrence of 4 inside this tuple. So if I modify this to a 3 instead, you can see that 6 is now printed out because 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the index of the first occurrence of 3 inside this tuple. Yeah, take note that .count and .index can be applied on a list also, so not only a tuple. Okay, now this brought us to our task. The second task of today's workshop. Given a list of numbers 6, -1, 9, 8, 1, 0, and 7, and the list of letters try guessing that spells out try guessing. Find all the letters using the numbers as the index in the order given above, and reverse the string to refill the password. So to put this task like in simpler terms, basically these numbers over here are the indexes that y'all are the numbers that y'all will use as indexes of this list over here, and the letters here will make out the password. Yeah, so you guys need to know what you guys need to find what's the password. So now just take like the next 5 minutes or so to try and solve this task. And I will show you all the intended solution soon, in 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay, so for those who are like not clear what you're supposed to do, so like y'all can open up your code collab file and just create a list first with this, just copy over this list over here to your code collab file. And so what this task want y'all to do is to like output a string to us, and the letters that make up the string is like denoted by these indexes over here. So you use these numbers, and these numbers refers to the indexes of this string over here. Yeah, and don't forget to reverse the string at the end to get the correct password.
Hi Rory, I'm not sure if I pronounce your name right. Can you try not to name the list as list? Yeah, should I try and rename the name of the list as something else? Because list is a function name in Python. So remember, I mentioned earlier, it's better not to name something like a name of a function. Right? Thank you. Naveen. Okay, so I see that you define the nums equals to all the numbers, right? I would suggest you put like a hashtag in front of the nums to put it as a comment, so that you will not run into an error later when you run it, because you're not supposed to define nums like that in Python. So if you allow me to help you, I'll just add a hashtag in front. I'm sorry, I mean read only. Okay, so Navin, so try and put a hashtag in front of nums so that when you run it, you won't receive an error. Okay, so the nums are like just for you guys to know. You guys don't have to define it inside Python itself. Or you can put it as a list as well. Up to you. Yep. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
1 more minute and I'll go through the solution of the task.
Oh, Rory, you're not supposed to like put all the numbers inside the bracket, then bracket 6, then close bracket, then you repeat that process for all the numbers. So you're not supposed to like put everything together. So it's quite a bit troublesome, but that's how you usually do it in Python. Yeah, so the error should be fixed.
Okay, now that 1 minute is up, I'll go through the intended solution of this task. Okay, this is the intended solution. So again, first, you just like type out the list here. Just copy out from the slide the list. And then, so what you can do to access the correct letters of the list is just with the use of the square bracket operator. So the name of the list followed by the square bracket operator, and then followed by the square bracket operator. So you just like type out whatever number we give you earlier inside the square bracket operator and concatenate it, and then do a dot reverse at the end to get the password. Okay. Now Rafael will go on to continue about conditionals. Yeah, Rafael, please.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'll be going through conditionals. All right. So first, let's continue on with the story. So congratulations, you have successfully broken into the safe. But quit celebrating as a new challenge lies in front of you. So although the safe contains a lot of diamonds, you're only able to carry one of these diamonds as they are very heavy. But your friend tipped you off again, and now you know that one of the diamonds worth 100 times more than the rest. Okay, so the diamond that worth 100 times more is blue, in the shape of a pyramid, and has a serial number of D2. All right, so only one diamond matches all three characteristics. Okay, so now let's get into conditionals. So first we have the if statement, and the if statement is like a choice. So you can either do this or that. And how to write a if statement is as shown. So you have the if at the front to tell the code that you're running an if statement now, and you have a Boolean expression right after it. So the result of the Boolean expression will either be true or false, and then you end it off with a colon at the end. So what this will do is that it will only run the code that is within the if statement if the Boolean is true. All right. So we will later see a few examples and it might be a bit more clearer for you. All right. So one more thing that I would like you guys to take note is that, as you can see here, the Boolean, the if statement is the code that is within the if statement is identified by an indentation as seen. So the code does not start on the same line as all the other code, and is indented here. So the program will know that the if statement is being run. All right. So here is an example. I would like you guys to guess what happens in this if statement. All right. Can you all put in your guesses in the chat? All right. Okay. Okay. So let me show you what it does. So over here, I have the exact same code. All right. And if I wait, I need to compile it. Okay. And when I run it, and yes, so it prints this is the end of the program, which is this line, line 6 right here. Now, let's see why it does not print the if statement. So as you can see, the if statement is x equals to 0, and then you print x is now 0, right? But why does it not print the if statement? Well, it's because x is defined as 15 at the top here. And the Boolean expression is x is less than 0. Therefore, x does not meet the requirement of being less than 0, and the Boolean expression is false. So once the Boolean expression is false, the if statement is ignored, and it continues on with the rest of the code. And right after the if statement is the print statement. This is the end of the program. All right. So let me demonstrate what will happen if the if statement is true. So now I have a negative number, -1, right? And -1 is less than 0. And therefore, the Boolean expression will be true. And hopefully, it should print out x is now 0. Okay. And it does indeed print x is now 0. And if we check in the console, x is now 0 and is no longer -1 because we changed the value of x within the if statement. All right. So this is fairly simple. If statement is quite simple. So now let's move on to the next part of conditionals. Okay, so before that, as a summary, first you'll meet the Boolean expression, which will be the start of the if statement. If it's true, you run the code, else you ignore it. And after that, regardless of what happens within the if statement, the rest of the program will continue to run. Okay, so as you can see earlier, regardless of what happens to the if statement, the print statement, this is the end of the program, it will still print regardless of what happens. All right. So now let's carry on with if else. So what we are doing here is just adding an additional else at the end of the program. So what this does is that if the Boolean expression is false and the if statement does not print, it will do the else statement instead. All right. So let me give you an example right here. Okay. So guess what happens in this program now that we have an else statement? Okay, so now that you guys have seen the else statement, let me show you. So wait, I need to compile this first. My mistake. All right. So now that I run the if else statement, as you can see, the print statement within the else prints is ran, and yes, and nothing has changed appears here. All right. And although the else statement prints, the print statement at the end of the program still runs. Therefore, at the end, it says this is the end of the program. All right. So if the if statement is false, the else statement will run. All right. Let me show you what happens if you have a negative number now. So now that you have a negative number, the if statement is true. And we've seen this earlier on with the if statement example. And as you can see, the else statement does not print because the if statement is true now. All right. So nothing has changed, does not print. And again, the print statement at the outside of the if statement does print. This is the end of the program. All right. I'll give you some time to digest this. If you have any questions, feel free to ask Celine or Rayan. All right. Now we have the Elif statement. So the Elif statement is the hardest part of the three, if, else, and Elif. So right here, you can think of the Elif as a ranking of choices. So the first choice that you'll encounter will always be the if statement, the one right up here. So if this is true, it will run, and everything else at the bottom will not run. So if the Boolean expression is true, if statement runs, Elif 1 and Elif 2 will not run, else will also not run. Okay. But if statement is false, it will go to the very next Elif statement, which is Boolean expression 2, as you can see on the slide here. So if Boolean expression 2 is true, it will run, and everything else at the bottom will not run. Okay? And this will go on until it will finally meet something that is true, or it meets the else. All right? So if all the expressions are false, else will run. If one of the Elif statement is true, then the Elif statement will run, and it will go down the the order as such. Okay, So I have an example here for you guys. It's for you guys to visualize it better. So as you can see here, you have a few variables, a few booleans. Okay, so these boolean expressions, or I assigned it to each variable. So it's the things that you will do in your time, in your free time, and you order it in this. Is in order of importance. So of course, you need to study first because that's very important. And then after studying, you need to take care of your well-being, so sleep. And then after that, if you do not need to sleep, you go shopping, and then if not, exercise is your last priority. All right. So what we do here is that since going to the library to study, right, is the most important thing that you have to do. You make that choice first, so you put it up here. Okay, so do you want to go to the library to study? And if so, you print bring math homework. Okay. However, as you can see here, going to the library to study is false, meaning you do not want to go to the library to study. So what do you do next? You go to your next most important thing in your list, which is going to sleep. And if you you go to sleep, and it's the Elif statement right now. It's the second most important thing on your list. And if it's true, you'll print good night. Okay. And as you can see, go to sleep is true, and therefore it should print good night. All right. And if it's false, however, it will go shopping. And if go shopping is true, it will print money fly away. And if not, it will go all the way down to go exercise. And then it will print running time. Okay. So I'll show you what happens if I run this. And as you can see, it prints good night. So as we seen earlier, it will ignore go study at library because it's false, right? So this if statement does not run. So now it's at this Elif statement, and it will see if go sleep is true, and it's indeed true. Therefore, it prints good night. However, as one peculiar thing that I want you guys to take note is that although go shopping is true, but the print statement money fly away does not print. And this is because the Elif statement above, which is go sleep, is already true. And therefore it takes priority over the go shopping Boolean expression. Okay. So once one of the Elif statement is true, it will print. Okay. Now let's go back to the slides. And here is an example, easier example for you guys to try out. Okay. You can guess what happens to the code and what prints out and what does not print. Okay. If you have any questions about what I mentioned earlier, right, you can always ask Rayan or Celine, who will help you in the chat. Okay. Now I will show you the code that is in the slides. Okay. Oh wait, sorry, no. I will just explain to you what happens here, because I already showed you the previous code. So here, you have over here you have x equals to 15, and obviously it's not greater than 0 because it's 15. And now it does not print x is now 0. All right. So it will go to the next statement, which is the Elif statement. And the Elif statement says it will only the Boolean expression in the Elif statement is x modulo 2 equals 1. So what this does is finding the remainder of x. And the remainder of x when divided by 2 is indeed 1. And therefore this solution, this Boolean expression is true. And when this Boolean expression is true, it will print this is an odd number. And because the Elif statement is true, the else statement, nothing has changed, will not print because Elif is already ran. Okay, so this is an odd number will print, and finally at the end, this is the end of the program will also print because it's outside of the if statement. Okay, now, so this is a summary of what happens. So you'll first meet the Boolean expression. If the Boolean expression is true, you'll run the code. If not, you will go to the next Elif statement and check the Boolean expression one more time. And you'll keep doing that until it finally finds a Boolean expression that is true. And when it does so, you will run the code and everything else below will not run. Okay? So let me show you one more thing, which is the difference between the if and the elif. So over here, you can see two codes and you can see the result at the bottom. So as you can see, if you have two ifs over here and you have and both ifs are true, it will print both true 1 and true 2. So what this shows is that if statements are, if you have two if statements, they are independent of each other, meaning what happens to the first if statement does not affect what happens to the second if statement. All right. So regardless of whether the first if statement is true, the second if statement will still run. Okay. On the other hand, if the first if statement is true and it prints true 1, the elif statement at the bottom will not run because it is affected by the if statement. The if statement is true, therefore elif statement will not run. However, if the if statement is false, only then the elif statement will have a chance to run. Okay? So this is how you differentiate between differentiate if and elif. Okay? Oops. Okay. So now we have come to the task for the third task for conditionals. Okay. So once again, to recap, you will have to find a diamond that is worth 100 times more than the rest. Okay. And the conditions are here. So color is blue, the shape is in a pyramid, and the serial number is D2. Okay. So you should print out success if the diamond is found, else you print fail. Okay, and the diamond that you're looking for is at the bottom here. So you please copy this code over. It's also inside your self-learning template. You can always go there and copy. And its color is blue, shape is a pyramid, and serial number D3. So if we see it from here, it's quite logical that the code should print out fail. Okay, so there is an additional hint that I will give you for this task. Okay, so you should print out fail, and if you print out success, there's something wrong with the code. Okay, so you guys just try. I'll give you guys 5 minutes. If you have any questions, you can always ask Celine or Ryan. Okay. Okay, I think time is up. If you have not got the code, it's fine. I will go through it. And if even afterwards, if you cannot get it, right, we will send the solution over so you can always take your time to look at it, all right? So this is the solution given. So what we did was actually use the AND operators here. So and to combine multiple Boolean expressions together. So I know that some of you all did not think of this, but we tried to use this because it incorporates what you have learned earlier on from what Ryan has taught. Okay, so let me go over to my okay. Okay, so let me show you what it does. Okay, so you have three separate Boolean expressions here. Color equals blue, shape equals pyramid, and serial number equals D2. All right. So these three Boolean expressions are connected with the and in the middle. So as we learned from earlier on, the and means that all conditions, all Boolean expressions within all Boolean expressions must be true in order for the entire statement to be true. All right. So I'm gonna run this and we'll see what happens. So it says fail. So we know that the code is working. Okay, so let me go into further detail as to why it says fail. So when it says fail, it means that the else statement is printing instead of the if statement. So let's look at the if statement now and see why is it not work. Why is it ignoring the if statement? So color over here is blue. So it indeed is. So this Boolean expression is true. All right. And afterwards, we go on to the shape. And the shape is indeed pyramid, as seen over here. We assigned it to be pyramid. And then the serial number is, however, D3. And the comparison here, serial number D3, and we are comparing it with D2. And so we know that this is false now. So we have a true and false. And that will return a false because the n has to has a requirement that both like or all Boolean expressions have to be true. Okay, therefore this is ignored and we print else. Okay, so now I know that you guys did, like some of you did not use n. So I have another solution here that I would like to share with you. Which will include only if and else. Okay. Okay. So let me tell you what this does. You first encounter this if statement. Okay. So you have color equals to blue, and if this is true, it will run the code which is within. So what is within is actually a nested if. So we call this nested ifs because it's a if within a if. Okay. So all these are nested. All these are within the if. And so if it's true, it will run this code now. And now that this code is running, the next if statement that you will encounter is this one, shape equals to pyramid. So if this is true, it will again run the code that is within it, which is serial number D2. And if this is finally correct, it will print success. So what is happening is that you are actually going through three separate Boolean expressions, and the following one only can run if the previous one is true. So this will also require you to have all three criteria met before you can print success. And if at any time, if the if statement is false, it will actually print fail, and it will go to the corresponding else statement. So as you can see, you can tell which else statement is paired with which if statement by looking at its indentation. So the first if statement is paired with this else statement, and then this if statement is paired with this else statement, and likewise for the last one, which is all the way inside. Okay. So let's run this. Okay, wait. Okay. Let me compile this and run it. And as you can see, it says fail. So this also works. Okay. So the color blue is it will satisfy this condition because the color is blue, and it will go on to the shape, and the shape is the shape of a pyramid. So this will also be satisfied, and finally it will go to the serial number. And since the serial number is false, it will actually print this else statement, print fail. Okay. So this might look a bit weird, but it's okay. If your solution works, it's fine. You do not have to follow what any of us wrote, okay? So there can be multiple solutions, especially for conditionals, because it depends on what you use. Maybe you use like the AND operators, or you use nested ifs. You might even use like Elif, which I did not use over here, okay? So it's fine as long as your code works, all right? So I'll give you all a minute to take this all in, and then next I will go through while loops, okay? Okay, so now let's go to loops. Okay, first let's carry on with the story. So, oh no, the policeman has burst into the bank and are hunting you down now. So you have gotten the diamond because you're very good at conditionals, right? So you got the diamond, but now you have to run away from the policeman. So you rush to the back of the bank, and now you're standing at a hallway full of doors. So you have a laptop that has the ability to detect policemen using its motion sensors, but you only print out a number. So if the number is an odd number, it will say there's no policeman. It means that there's no policeman there and you are free to run. If not, there's a policeman there and you should hide. All right. So odd for no policeman and even for policeman. Now we will get back to the story later if you cannot remember all this, but let's carry on with loops. So there are two types of loops in Python, the for loop and while loop. Okay, so what loops does is actually it allows you to repeat a process a certain number of times without actually having to manually write it out. So for example, let's say you want to print the string hello world like 100 times. Will you really want to write print hello world, print hello world, print hello world 100 times on your file and then run it? That's very tedious. And we know that code is supposed to make things more efficient for us humans, right? So what we have here are loops, which will allow us to repeat a process multiple times, all right? So firstly, we have the for loop. So the for loop is a special type of loop that will, which only which requires either a list or a string to iterate through. Now, what is iteration? Iteration is like going through something. So it's like you run through a string or you run through a list, and every time you do so, you will take on the value of one of its either characters or elements. So it might be a bit hard to um, uh, visualize what iteration is. So you can look at these two examples here, all right? So the first one we have string equals to Python, and then so now that we have the string here, we want to iterate through this string. So we put for char in string, and then we print char, okay? So let me go over here and actually show you guys. Okay, so okay, so now that we're here, right? So firstly, we first have to tell the code that okay, we want to iterate through string Python. Okay, so we have string Python here, and wait, let me get rid of the code at the bottom. Okay, so we have this string Python here, And now you want to iterate through this string. So we put it in the for loop here. So, and then you might be asking, what is char? So char is actually a temporary variable. So what the temporary variable does is that every time it loops, it will take on the next character inside the string. Okay, let me run this for you. Okay, wait, sorry, wrong. Wait. Okay, now I run. Okay, as you can see, it prints Python. And we can see from this code, you're printing char, right? So char, we can deduce that char is actually changing as the loop is running, right? So what is actually happening is that first you have a string and then you encounter the for loop. And then now we have a char character. So we have a char variable. Now this char variable will look at the string and say, okay, first I'll take the first character now, which is P. Okay. And now that is P, it will print out and when you print out char, it will just be P because that's what the code does. And as you can see, after print, there's nothing else. So the code would know that, okay, this is the end of the program. I should go back. And when it goes back, char will now take on the next character, which is Y. And it will print Y at the bottom. And then it will keep doing so until it is at the end of the string. Okay. Okay, so now that you know that the what char does, we now that we know what char does, let me show you something else, which is that we can actually do this with lists as well. So meaning we can iterate through a list. Okay, so if I compile this and run, as you can see, it prints red, blue, yellow, green now. So again, you must indicate that the colors, you must indicate that you are iterating through colors, okay? So you put colors here. And one thing that you might realize is that I'm not using char anymore. I'm writing element here. So now you know that actually the temporary variable can be called whatever you want. However, you must remember to keep it consistent by using the same name at the bottom when you want to print it, okay? So I can always change this to like hello, and then over here I will have to change it to hello. And when I compile this, okay, and run, it will still print red, blue, yellow, green. Okay. So this shows that the temporary variable can be whatever it wants, and all you have to do is to declare what you are iterating through by stating the variable at the end here. And again, you have to end it off with a colon, just like conditionals. Also, everything in the for loop will be indented as shown here. Okay, so if I have something out here, let's say I have print hello. Okay, so this is a list. Okay, print hello world. So this is a list that I want to print out, a string that I want to print out, right? However, it's not indented. So when I run this, it will only print out once, which is hello world. Okay. However, when I indent it and I run, it will print every time it loops. So it'll be red, and then it'll first print hello, the variable hello, and then you'll print hello world. And then it will do so one more time with blue, and then hello world, yellow hello world, green hello world. Okay. So there's the difference with the indentation. So it is important to remember to indent your code. And if you do not want it in the loop, you always do not indent it. All right. Okay. So that is it. And now we go on to using range. So range is actually a function that identifies a range. Okay. So range is a function that identifies like a start, stop, and step, which is a bit abstract because you cannot really visualize it by itself. So, for example, please load. It's not loading. You want me to? Okay, wait. Okay, never mind. I'll just do it here. It's not loading. So over here, so I'll print range, let's say 10. Okay, and then I compile this and I run. See, you'll print range 0, 10. So it's not really helpful. You don't really know what is happening here. So what you can do, I'll give you a way to actually visualize what is happening. Is actually to use the list function. So as you can see, I just added a list and I enclose the thing in the I enclose range in the list, and when I run this, it will actually print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this shows you the range that you're working with. Okay, so this is very helpful for if you are stuck and you don't know what's happening with the range, or maybe you have an error. This can help you debug your code. Okay, so you have a list and then you put your range inside. So let me explain what this thing does. So as you can see, it starts from 0 and it ends at 9. So 10 is actually the stop. Stop means that is the it tells the range this is the end of your range. Okay, so if you have one number in the range only, that will be your stop. Okay, so if you have one number, it'll be your stop. And then you might ask, what is your start? So where do you start? So if you only have one number, it will by default your range will start from 0. Okay, therefore it starts at 0 here. However, I can always declare that my start is 0. So you always put start and then stop. If you have two numbers, it'll be your start and your stop. Okay, it's a bit hard to understand because range is very flexible. So if you have one number, start is optional. Okay, start is optional. However, if you want to put in a start, it has to come before your stop. Okay, so when I run this, it will print out the same thing because my start is 0. Okay, wait. Then now right, if I put 3 and I run, it will actually run. It will actually start from 3 because I declared that it starts from 3. So if you do not put the start, you will start from 0. And if you put 3, you will start from 3. If you put a start, you will have to put the start in front of the stop. And now you can add a step. So a step is your increment. So if I have 0, 10 and I run, you will actually print 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so this shows that it will skip by 2. Okay, and 10 again does not print because it is the stop. Okay, can I let you guys to digest for a while, and then I'll give you all a minute to do so. Okay. Okay, so sorry for that. Let me show you another example, which is here. Okay, so can you guess what will print if we have for I in range 6 over here, the top one. We'll do the top one first. Okay. All right. Can you guess in the chat what will print for I? It will print. Okay. Let me show you. Yeah. Okay. So range. So let me comment out the bottom one. And if I print for I in range 6, it will actually print 0. Wait, oh, wait. I forgot to compile this again. And yes, it should print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So why is this so? Because as we've seen earlier, your range is actually 0 to 5, right? So every time you go through the for loop, it will increment the thing, it will go to the next element. So it will start from 0 and then it will print 0. And then once it prints 0, it will go back and then it will take on the next value, which is 1, and then it will print 1 and so on. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So if you do not know what is the range, again, you can use the list function and you print out a list. You enclose the range in the list and then you print that out and you will know what is the list that you're dealing with. Okay. So now let's go on to the next next example, which is the one at the bottom over here. So what will happen now if I have a step and a start? So this is the start again. So it's 0, and then the stop is 6, and the step is 2. So can you all guess what will be printed out? I see someone say 0 to 4. Yes, that should be it. Let me see. Yes, so 0 to 4. So why is that so? It's because again, you have the step. Your start is at 0, which is denoted by this. Okay, and your stop is 6. So it should be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However, you're skipping by 2. So it'll be 0, and you'll skip 1, you'll go to 2. And then you'll skip 3, it'll go to 4. So it's 0, 2, 4. Okay. And lastly, it does not print 6 because 6 is not included. Okay. So this is actually very similar to your list slicing, which was covered by Celine earlier. All right. So if let's say I have a list here that is there's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And then if I print list 0, 6, 2, because you learned that list slicing is like that, right? If I run it, it will also print 0, 2, 4. All right. So the way that range works is very similar to how you slice a list. Okay. And you can always, and like I said earlier, you can always make the range into a list and print it out, and you will know what is the range you're dealing with. All right. So let's go back to the slides. Okay. So this is a summary of what I said earlier. So start is optional, step is optional over here, and you put the start at the front of the stop and the step at the end. Okay. So what is not optional is the stop, because the stop is always required and the stop number will not be included. So it will stop at stop -1 as shown in the slides here. Okay. Now let's go on to while loops. So earlier on, as you can see, we always have a range to, or a list or something to iterate through, because that's what for loops does. Okay, so the for loop requires something to iterate through, a string, a range, or an array. Okay, so a list or a tuple. But for while loops, it does not require a string or array to iterate through. You don't do iteration in while loops because what happens is that the while loop will keep running until a condition is false. So it is sort of like a continuous if condition. So over here, we have while and then a condition. And the condition is a Boolean state, a Boolean expression, which as shown earlier is similar to the if statement, okay? So it's a Boolean expression. And if the Boolean expression is true, it will do something, which is like, it will run the while loop, okay? So it will run the while loop. And once the while loop has finished running, it will loop back to the top of the while loop and again check if the condition is met or not. If it's still met, if the condition is still true, it will run it again until the condition is false and then you exit, okay? So here is an example, okay? Can I let you guys guess how many times how many times hello will be printed? Okay, so what this while loop does is actually it prints hello, okay? And it has the condition up here that I must be less than 3. And then at the end of the whole while loop, you add 1 to I. So I is always increasing, I is less than 3. So how many times will hello be printed? So okay, some of you say 3, some of you say 2. I'll show you over here. So while loop, let me compile this. Okay, so let's run this, and it actually prints hello 3 times. So let me go through it step by step. Okay, so firstly you have I that is 0, okay, and then you reach the condition. Now the condition is that I must be less than 3. So I is 0, I is indeed less than 3. It will enter the while loop, which is over here. So it will print hello once. This is the first time it prints. And then it will add 1 to I. So I becomes 1. And it goes all the way to the top. And it will compare again. Is I still less than 3? And I is still less than 3 because I is 1 now. So it will enter the while loop one more time. And it will print hello the second time. And now it goes to the end. It will add 1 to I is now 2, it will go to the top and check again. So 2 is less than 3, it will come down and print hello. So now you printed hello 3 times and you add 1 more to I and I is now 3. So when you go to the top, I is no longer less than 3, I equals to 3. So this condition is now false and it will leave the while loop, okay? So I think that is if I can always print out hello and I can always print out I at the end over here, okay? So right now I'll print out hello and I at the back. So what you see here is 0, 1, 2. So it shows you the current value of I. It will show you the current value of I when it prints hello. So the first value will be 0, then 1, then 2. Note that it doesn't reach 3 because 3 is not less than 3. All right. Now I want to show you something. What if we do not have this line? Okay. Let's change this back to hello. Okay. So what happens is I does not change, right? I does not change. I will always be less than 3 because I is 0. And you will just keep printing hello. So if I run this, as you can see, it prints a lot of hello. And at the bottom, as I'm speaking, it's still printing hello. All right. So I have to stop the code like that, and it'll stop. So this is actually very, very dangerous because what you have encountered is actually a infinite loop. So it does not end, and because there is no way of making the statement false. I is always less than 3, so this Boolean expression is always true, and it will always be stuck inside the while loop. Okay, So this is something that you guys have to take note when you are coding on your own, because if you do not ensure that there's a way of exiting your while loop, it might run into a runtime error, or you might not even know that your code is stuck in a while loop. Okay, so just take note when you're writing your code, and always change your condition so that eventually it will leave the while loop. Okay, now let's go back to the slides, and this is your task 4. So again, recap, you reach a hallway full of doors. Okay, you reach a hallway full of doors, and then you have you are supposed to make a loop, and this is the numbers that the computer has printed out. Okay, so it has printed out all these numbers, and as we know earlier, odd means that there is no policeman, so you should print out run, and if it's even, you print high. So after the end of the loop, you should print you have escaped. All right, so I want you guys to use either for loop or while loop. I recommend for loop because you have a list to iterate through, and then you use the for loop to iterate through this, and then decide within the for loop whether to print run or hide. All right, so you should have a few print statements at the end of the result, like run, hide, run, all that, and then at the end you have escape. Okay, I'll give you guys 5 minutes to do so. If you have any questions or like you do not understand this task, always feel free to ask Rayan or Celine. All right. Okay, so I recommend, like, one hint that I will give you guys is that you have to use conditionals within the loop. Okay, so because you're comparing the numbers, whether it's odd or even, and so you need conditionals within the loop to check for that criteria. Okay, and the way to find whether it's odd or even, if you cannot recall, is actually to use the modulo. So you find the remainder. If the remainder is 1, you know it's an odd number. If the remainder is 0, you know it's an even number. So if you put 5 modulo 2, it should give you 1, right? So now, so that's the way of checking whether it's odd or even. Okay, and you need to pair that up with conditionals within your loop. All right. Okay, guys, if you guys use you guys should iterate through the thing using a temporary variable, right? So you just put, it's quite I do not know why some of y'all have 5 as a even number. So maybe you guys try with another number or something first. All right, if it still doesn't work, it's okay. You just get a rough, just attempt the question, so at least you got somewhere with your code. Or and then later on I will show you the solutions. Okay, and maybe that will be clearer for you. Oops, sorry. Yeah, so maybe it'll be clearer for you later. If and then at the end of everything, if you still do not know how to do it, we will always send you the answers. Okay, so don't worry about it. Okay, just keep trying. Okay, it might be a bit frustrating, but do not give up. Okay, if you have any more questions, or maybe you can share your file with either Ray or Celine, and then they will help you personally with the code. All right. Okay, so I think Rayan is trying to solve the problem for you guys. I will go on to the solution. Okay, and we will see why does your thing not work. So this is the solution that we have. It's quite simple. All right. So we use a for loop because you have a list to iterate through, so it's easier to use a for list, a for loop, okay? And then you have if, and then you have x equals, and then you have an if statement inside and an else statement. So as you can see, the if statement is x modulus 2 equals 1, okay? So this is checking if the value of x is an odd number. So if it's an odd number, you will print run. And if it's not an odd number, you will ignore the if statement and you'll go to else and you'll print hide instead, all right? So let's, wait, how do I do this? Okay, so let me show you over here, okay? So compile, and if I run this, okay, so it'll be run, hide, run, hide, you have escape, right? So, so this is the answer, okay? And let me go through step by step. So first, x is 1, okay? And you'll check, is the remainder of x when divided by 2 equals 1? And it does equal 1 because it's an odd number, right? So it will print run first. And because it print run, else is ignored, and it's the end of the loop. And it is the end of the loop because this print statement, you have escape, is not indented. Therefore, it's not inside the for loop. It is actually outside, okay? So once you finish this, it will go back up and then it will take on the value of 5 now. So 5 is also has a remainder of 1 when divided by 2. And therefore, it will print run, okay? And then else is ignored again, it will go back up. Now it's 2. So 2 would be, when divided by 2, will not have a remainder of 1. You'll have a remainder of 0. So this, the if statement is ignored. And now you go to the else statement and print hide instead. So that will be your first hide here. And you do so for 6, 2, 4, 4, because they are all even numbers, right? So their remainders will all be 0 when divided by 2. And then finally you reach 1, which is your last odd number, okay? And then afterwards, you it's your last odd number, so it will be run. And then you reach your last even number 6, which will be hide. And then you will end the for loop because you have finished iterating through the entire list, and you'll leave the for loop and print you have escaped. All right. So that is the for loop solution. Now, what if you want to use while loop? Okay. So let me show you. For while loop, you actually need to use length. So you need to have a new variable, length. Okay. Let me just call it okay, length equals to length L. So remember when what Rayan taught you, length is actually the function to find the length of find the length of L, okay? So you have a while loop here, and then while length does not, okay? Oh, also you need a counter. Okay, so counter equals 0. I'll explain what's happening here once I'm done. Okay, so while counter is less than length, and then you need the counter to index. You need the, okay, So wait, let me see. Oh, okay. Okay, so here is the while solution. Okay, so what you have is counter is 0, and then length is just the length of the list. Okay, so what you're doing is actually making use of the length to ensure that you are only iterating through, you're only comparing the elements within the list. Okay, so what I have here, L square bracket counter. So I'm using the square bracket operators to actually index the list. So first off, counter is 0, and because 0 is less than the length of the list, it will enter the while loop. And when it enters the while loop, L square bracket counter means L square bracket 0. So the first element, or the element at the 0th index is actually 1. Therefore, we are actually just writing here 1 modulo 2 equals 1. All right. So every single time this happens, every single time you do this, you will either print, run, or hide, right? And then you will have to add 1 to the counter. So this is like moving up the list, moving up the list, because you're indexing using counter here. All right. So you move up. Next counter will be 1, and at index 1 it will be value 5. So you now compare 5 and find its remainder. All right. All right. So it will actually give you the same solution here. So regardless of what loops you use, it does not really matter as long as you get the answer. All right. So as you can see here, there's many ways of solving the problems with multiple, with different loops, or like you can even try different conditionals. Okay. So I think that is the end. And now I'll hand it over to Celine to talk about functions. All right, thank you.
Um, Moving on, I'll now, and this also brings us to the final task of today's workshop. You finally reach the end of the bank, but you face one last log. This log will give you dimensions of cuboids and requires you to produce the volumes within 5 seconds. But you need an efficient way to get done, as there's no time for you to recode every line for each question. Failure to do so will result in you getting caught by the police. So what are functions? Functions, you guys can think of functions as a tool. It's like a block of code that you can use over and over again in your program. It helps shorten the program and reduce repetition. The syntax for functions is very simple. Basically, you just type out def, which stands for define, followed by the name of the function, and then the arguments of the function inside the round bracket operator. I'll explain more on what I mean by arguments of the function later. And below that line, indented, is basically just type out anything the function will like do. Yeah. Some function may also have a return statement. A return statement is basically like a special statement that you can use in a function, and what it does is that it returns the function's result to the caller. Again, I'll like demonstrate what I mean by this later. Okay, so now let's take a look at this example. Yeah. So basically what's going on here is that I'm defining a new function and I've decided to name it Append. And what this function does is basically just very simple, add 10 to whatever arguments you pass on inside the function. So yeah, what I mean by an argument is like an argument in a function is when you pass an information into the function and the function can use this information and process them to do something. So yeah, this is why you can see that on the right side of the screen, we have 30 printed out because 20 plus 10 is 30. So yeah, the return statement here has so again to recap, what a return statement in a function does is that it returns like it allows the function result to be it pass on the function result to the caller, and in this case this variable here is our caller, and this is why the result of the function is now stored inside this variable called caller. Yeah, get it? Moving on, you can also put in a function that does not take in any arguments, but instead, when the function is run in the program later, it will ask the input from the user with the input function as taught by Ryan earlier. Yeah, for example, in this example here, the function does not receive any argument, and when the code is run, it will ask the user to input what's X and what's Y. And this brings us to the final task of today's workshop. You are to create a function that takes in 3 inputs, the length, the width, and the height of a cuboid. Assume that they are all integers and non-zero. The function will calculate the volume of the cuboid and print it out for you. Yeah, so now just take the next few minutes, maybe 4 minutes, to solve this task, and I'll show you the intended solution later. Yeah, I'll now go through the solution of the final task. Yeah, this is the intended solution. And to explain how this works, I'll just copy this over to the code collab file. Yeah, so this is an example of a function that does not take in any arguments. And when you run the function, yeah, the function will ask the user for the input, and you can just like type in any input, like for example 10, 54, and 2. Yeah, and the volume will be like returned to us accordingly. So yeah, you guys can take a few moments to like read through my code and process them. I think it's quite straightforward. Yeah, so remember to use the int function to convert the input into an integer. This is because like again, input automatically takes in a string. So to make sure that Python knows how to process them, make sure to use the int function. Yeah. And it's 1 o'clock now. This is the end of our workshop. Ryan should send in the link to our solution file, and you can take a look at that at the end of the workshop and like try to attempt the task if you haven't done so, if like you just have no time to do it in the workshop itself. And we will also share the slides. We will also share the slides in the Discord, in the BBCS Discord later. Yeah, this is the end of our workshop. Thank you.
Inside of the file that I just shared, right, you guys have to fork the project to your own account, and then you guys can edit it from there. Okay, and then we won't give you, for these files, right, there's only part of the solution, so you guys can try, if you guys want to learn, you can replace the blanks with your answer, and then you see if you get the correct solution or not. And then the full solution will be in the slides which we will be sharing later. Okay, thank you so much, guys. I hope you guys learned something new today.
All right, thanks everyone. Thank you to the team for giving that wonderful workshop. Wait, just to make sure, just check. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah, okay.